I'm delighted, of course, to have you join me here in this class. Now, in this very module, I will be discussing the topic religious reforms. Religious reform. That is the topic that I will be discussing in this module. Now, with emphasis on King Josiah's religious reforms. All right, so a bit more specific, we'll be focusing on King Josiah's religious reforms. And of course, this is referenced in 2 Kings chapter 22 from verse 1 down to 30. Now let's begin looking at first this young man called Josiah. Now, it will interest you to note here that Josiah was about 8 years old when he began to reign. All right? And of course, this young man called Josiah reigned for 41 years in Jerusalem. Please take note of that. He reigned for 41 years in Jerusalem. All right? Of Judah. Now, he did that which was right in the sight of God because he walked in the ways of his grandfather, and that was who? David. All right? King Josiah, all right, did that which was right in the sight of God, okay, by walking in the footsteps of his father, King David. Now, of course, you know who King David was. David was referred to in the Bible as a man after God's own heart. All right, David again was the father of Solomon. All right, and happens to be the grandparent of King Josiah. All right, so he came from the lineage of King David. Now, he showed much interest in the things of God. And one of the first assignment, okay, that was being carried out by this young man called Josiah was the repair and, of course, the renovation of the temple. Okay, this was one of the first assignment that King Josiah carried out during his reign and his time as king over Jerusalem. All right, and now later, when the book of the law was found in the temple by Hilkiah, all right, the high priest. Hilkiah was an high priest during the time of King Josiah. So he went into the house of the Lord's house, which was the temple, and of course discovered the book of the law. So when this book of the law was found in the temple, Josiah engaged in other reforms. All right, now this book was read to the king. And when he heard the content, all right, of the book that was being read to King Josiah, he actually did what? He rent his clothes. All right? He rent his clothes, tore his clothes. Why? Because of the content from the book that was being read to King Josiah. And the king showed or demonstrated his actions. All right? And the actions he demonstrated was the fact that he rented his clothes. All right? That was what the king did. And what happened next? Now, King Josiah, being the king of Israel who loved God so much, did not stop having rented his clothes when the book of the law was being read. All right? To him. Remember, we said that it was Hilkiah, the high priest, okay, who discovered this book. All right, take note of that. And of course, the book was being read to him. And when the content of the book was being read to him, what happened? He rented his clothes, okay, as a sign of repentance because he knew that they had transgressed greatly against God. All right. Now, Josiah sent Hilkiah, the priest, okay, immediately, and Shaphan, his secretary. Now, Shaphan was the secretary to the king, Josiah, and others to inquire of the Lord through the prophetess. And who was this prophetess? Of course, prophetess Uda. All right? Uda the prophetess. And Uda was the wife of Shalim. Okay, now she was the prophetess, okay, during the time of King Josiah. Now it's important you also take note of that there. All right, now when this team, okay, went and they met the prophetess Uda. Now prophetess Uda said to them, "Thus says the Lord, behold, I will bring evil upon this place and upon its inhabitants. All the words of the book which the king of Judah had read," that is referring now to Josiah, "because they had forsaken me and have burnt incense to other gods, that they might provoke me to anger with all the work of their hands. Therefore my wrath will be kindled against this place, and it will not be quenched." Now this is referenced in 2 Kings 22 from verse 16 down to 17. Now it's important you take note of that. 2 Kings 22, 16 down to 17. Now for King Josiah, actually, all right, the Lord had actually said that because his heart was pertinent, and of course he humbled himself before the Lord when he heard the word, now his eyes would not see evil, and he would gather, all right, to his people in peace. King Josiah summoned all the headers of Israel and read this book of the law to them. Okay, the book of the covenant, which was found in the house of the Lord. Now King Josiah stood, okay, by the temple's pillar, all right, and made a covenant to walk with the Lord and keep his commandments and his testimonies, and of course his statutes, with all his heart and all his soul. Now this did exactly King Josiah. Now let's look at some of the reforms that were being carried out by this wonderful king, King Josiah. Now Josiah's reforms. Now number one, it's important you note that King Josiah, as part of the reforms that he carried out, was that he ordered the priests to bring out all the vessels made for Baal and Asherah and burnt them. Now Baal and Asherah were foreign gods. All right, now remember, Baal and Asherah was first introduced by King Ahab and the wife he got, Jezebel. All right, the Sidonian princess. All right, now the father was Elba, and she imported that foreign god called Baal and Asherah and introduced it to the people of Israel. And God was angry for this act. So during the time and the reign of King Josiah, he came to abolish that which his predecessor actually had done wrong, to correct and right the wrongs. And God was pleased with his actions. So he actually ordered the priest to bring out all the vessels made for Baal and Asherah and burn them. And two, what did Josiah did? He deposed the idolatrous priests, okay, and the kings of Judah, who had, of course, ordained, all right, to burn incense in the high places, okay, of the cities of Judah and, of course, Jerusalem. And he didn't stop there. He also brought out the Asherah from the house of the Lord and burnt it, all right. Now, these are some of the reforms that King Josiah actually carried out during his time. Number three, he broke down the houses of the maid court prostitution. Okay, the prostitution. Okay, court prostitution, of course, was a situation where the idol priests made love with some women. Okay, with the deceitful belief that the sexual act would cause the god of fertility to actually make the land fertile. So this act was abominable before God, and these were part of the reforms that were being carried out by this wonderful king called Josiah. Now, number four, he defied Tophet, okay, to prevent people from burning their sons or daughters, all right, as sacrifice to Molech. Okay, he further removed the horses, okay, the kings of Judah, of course, had dedicated to the sun. All right, these are actually reforms that have been carried out by this wonderful king Josiah. Now, other reforms that were equally carried out by this man or king Josiah was that Josiah carried out his reforms up to the northern kingdom. Okay, he removed actually the shrines of the high places that were in the city of Samaria, which the king, of course, of Israel had made. All right. Now, these the reforms of King Josiah. Again, number says he restored the feast of Passover. Now, of course, you know the feast of Passover that actually began as well back as when the children of Israel were still in the land of Egypt in captivity, and the Lord was bound to deliver them. And of course, and he says they should slay a lamb and put the blood by the lintel, that if I see the blood, I will pass over. And the meat from that sacrifices were being used to celebrate the feast of the Passover, of course. So the feast of the Passover at the time stopped because God actually instructed his people, Israel, to continue with this practice. All right. And over time, they kept to it until they stopped it at some point in time. So King Josiah, as part of his reforms, was able to restore back the feast of Passover, and of course commanded the people to keep, all right, it as it is written in the book of the covenant. Now, marking the feast of the Passover, and which had been neglected in Israel even from the time of the judges. Now, you could see that it's far back to the time of the judges. Now, we're still looking at the reforms of Josiah. Now, another reforms that Josiah also carried out was that he abolished witchcraft, sorceries, soothsayers, okay, divinations, and of course their idols. All right, King Josiah's reforms were so great that the Bible had to say something about his reforms. Okay, the reforms of King Josiah was so wonderful that the Bible records that before him there was no kings like him, okay, who turned to the Lord with all his heart and with all his soul and with all his might, according to all the law of Moses. Nor did any like him arise after him. Now you could find that reference in 2 Kings chapter 23, verse, of course, 25. All right. Now, we're going to move next and we'll look at similarities between today's religious situation and that of Josiah. The similarities. All right. What are some of the similarities if you look at the days of King Josiah and our present day church? All right. What is, or present day believers? What is the similarities between today's religious situation and, of course, that of Josiah? I know you're thinking right now. Of course, think about it for a minute. What do you think are those similarities? Okay, I haven't looked at and examined what transpired and happened during the time of King Josiah. Now, looking at our present-day church, present-day believers, present-day Christian leaders, what would you have to say about this? Now, let's look at this together and let's see the outcome. Of course. Now, number one, of course, we discover that crimes and various vices are now rampant in the churches today. All right, we have crimes, we have various vices, and they are rampant in our churches today. Of course, you will agree with me on that one. All right, then two, there are many corrupt preachers in a society, and of course, and the church today. All right, many corrupt preachers in a society and the church today. We have false teachers, false prophets. In fact, it's in the Bible. The Bible mentioned it. There will be false prophets, false preachers, and all of that. And that, of course, we're seeing happening in our day and our time. All right. Now, another point that I also equally like us to also examine and look at is that as it was in the days of Josiah, when the people were filled, okay, with immoral acts, all right, so also we have in a society today people we think are practicing, of course, the religion, are doing something else. All right, people who we thought are practicing the religion are, of course, doing something contrary to what we expect and taught they were actually doing. So now we'll move on now, and now we'll look at significance of Josiah's religious reforms. We'll look at the significance of Josiah's religious reforms. Now, number one, Josiah's reforms brought about spiritual revival in Israel. All right? Josiah's reform brought about spiritual revival in Israel. Now, you will agree with me that after the reforms that were being carried out by King Josiah, wiping out the main court of prostitution, wiping out and defeating Molech, wiping out Asherah and Baal, and all of those false prophets, the sorcerer, the smoothsayers, the divinations, and all the witchcrafts, okay? Abolishing everything and wiping them all out, the people regained back their sanity, their spirituality became intact, and there was spiritual revival everywhere. The heart of the people of Israel, the people of God, was turned back to God, their maker, all right? And not to foreign gods anymore. So yes, of course, the reforms brought about spiritual revival in Israel. All right. Now, it's important that you also know that the temple in Jerusalem was repaired and established as the center of worship in Israel. And these were all kudos to the reforms of King Josiah. All right. All of these was practically made possible by the reforms of King Josiah. Now, the reforms made the people rededicated themselves to the service of God. All right? Now, the ordinances and, of course, the statutes of God were now made clearer to the people, courtesy the reforms of King Josiah. Now, this is commendable, this is applaudable, and this is something our Christian leaders today should emulate and, of course, copy from. All right? Now, it's important that you note here again that Josiah showed typical example of a good leader, despite the fact that he was very young when he started ruling. All right? Although his father did what was evil, okay, in the sight of God, he did not follow in his father's footsteps. All right? He charted a new course for himself, and that course was the path of God. And he led the people before God, and God was pleased with him. Okay, in like manner, people should also endeavor to emulate good things, okay, and not harbor evil at all times. Okay, accordingly, people should not, okay, follow the bad examples of their elders or predecessor, neither our leaders, but do that which is right, even if you are the only one doing that. All right, I want to believe you've learned something from this topic and from this interesting module. All right, I'll see you in the next module. And of course, bye-bye for now. I need you to reflect on what we've taught so far. I'll ask you questions in class.